Okay, so you guys have been sending in some really fascinating stuff lately. A lot of it's centered around kind of like improving self-management skills,
Yeah.
really taking control of your day and really kind of chasing your ambitions. So for this deep dive, we really wanted to go in and extract the most potent insights on mastering this whole idea of self-management, but with a specific lens on stuff that you can actually do right away. No fluff, just actionable stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the internet is just bursting at the seams with productivity hacks and, these secrets that'll
Yay.
magically transform you into a productivity
Oh,
machine.
right.
What we want to do is actually go deeper.
Yeah.
We're drawing from all this awesome material you've sent us and really kind of like unearth these core principles
Yeah.
that really empower you to be more intentional with your time, more focused in your actions, and really, build that resilience.
Yeah.
Like you're building this internal compass.
I love that internal compass idea. So, okay, when we talk about self-management, what are we actually talking about here? Like, what's at the core of this?
At its heart, self-management is really about your ability to uh, kind of steer your own ship,
Yeah.
to regulate your emotions, to make sure that your actions are guided by your intentions, and to use your time in a way that actually aligns with those goals that you've set for yourself. It's about being the captain, the architect, not just, along for the ride.
Right, yeah. So many of the resources that you sent in, really highlighted a number of key skills that fall under this self-management umbrella. So when you look at the big picture here, what would you say are the absolute essentials? Like if you were to boil it down for someone who really wants to level up in this area, where should they start?
So the material consistently pointed to a handful of interconnected areas that we need to touch on. First and foremost, time management, right? How we structure our time and how we leverage those hours in a day. Then, of course, goal setting, defining those targets and doing it with a lot of clarity so that we know what we're aiming for. And then we get into the emotional side of things, emotional regulation, learning how to navigate those feelings in a way that's constructive and helps us move forward. And hand in hand with that is stress management. We all experience stress, but how do we manage it so that it doesn't become debilitating? And then, of course, self-discipline, that inner drive to follow through, to stick with those commitments that we make to ourselves. And it kind of leads into accountability, right? Owning our progress, but also owning our missteps and using those as opportunities to learn and grow. And then finally, something that's so crucial in today's world, adaptability. How do we adjust when life throws us those inevitable curveballs? How do we roll with the punches?
Yeah, it's such a comprehensive of tools. And I think what really struck me when going through all of this material is the why behind it all. It's not just about checking things off a to-do list or getting more things done. There are these really profound benefits to having these skills dialed in. What really stood out to you in that regard?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. It's not just about being busy. It's about being effective. And the sources really point to this idea of like a positive feedback loop, better self-management leading to improvements in all these areas of your life. For example, you start making clearer decisions, less swayed by those immediate impulses or distractions. Productivity naturally increases because you're focused, you're organized, you know what you need to do. And maybe most importantly, and this really resonated with me, it bolsters your mental well-being. You're less stressed. You don't feel constantly overwhelmed. And then it even impacts your relationships because you're more reliable, you're more present. And from a career perspective, it's a huge driver for advancement. People notice when you've got it together. And ultimately, it creates more space for what truly matters to you. It's about that balance.
Absolutely. And the sources also touch upon how people with strong self-management tend to be perceived by others. Did anything stand out to you in that regard? Like, what are the qualities that really jump out?
Yeah, consistently they were seen as dependable, reliable. They do what they say they're going to do. They're also seen as proactive, always taking initiative, and anticipating needs before they even arise. And fundamentally, they're seen as goal-oriented, people who make progress consistently. And these aren't just, nice to have qualities. These are assets in navigating life,
Yeah.
both personally and professionally.
Huge assets. So let's get down to brass tacks here. For someone listening who's, really inspired to take control, where do they begin? What's that foundational step that the material kind of points to?
It all starts with setting those clear goals. But not just, vague wishes or dreams. We're talking about goals that are smart,
specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Think of it like this. Your goals aren't just endpoints. They're like a North Star that guides your decisions on a daily basis.
Yeah.
The more clearly you define them, the more they're going to pull you in the right direction.
I love that. So it's about breaking those big ambitions down into smaller, more manageable steps, right?
Yeah.
To make it feel less overwhelming and more doable.
Exactly. It's about creating that roadmap, that step-by-step guide. And a lot of the material highlighted the importance of not just setting the big goal, but also identifying those immediate actions you can take. What's the next step? What can I do right now?
Right.
And it builds momentum. It gives you those little victories to celebrate along the way,
Yeah.
and that fuels further progress. So once you've got that clarity, the next logical step is to prioritize. And a tool that came up over and over again was the Eisenhower matrix.
Oh.
Where you categorize your tasks based on urgency and importance.
Right.
It helps you figure out what really deserves your attention right now and what can wait.
Right. It's so powerful for differentiating between what's truly mission critical and what's just sort of, screaming for your attention, but maybe not as important. It helps you focus your energy on the things that actually move the needle.
Right. And the real power of the Eisenhower matrix, I think, is that it forces you to make those conscious decisions. What deserves your immediate attention? What can be delegated? What can be delayed? What can maybe even be eliminated altogether?
Yeah.
It's about making those choices strategically.
Yeah.
And that leads directly into how you manage your time effectively. And we saw a ton of great techniques in the material. One that comes up a lot is time blocking.
Yes.
Intentionally scheduling blocks of time for specific tasks or activities.
I am such a fan of time blocking. It's been such a game changer for me to bring some structure into a day that can feel like it's constantly being pulled in a million different directions.
Yeah, totally. And what other time management strategies did you see in there that resonated with you?
Well, the Pomodoro technique, that classic one with the focused work intervals,
Yes.
those short breaks. It's not just about the work, right? It's those built-in breaks that give your brain a chance to reset, to avoid that burnout, that feeling of overwhelm.
That's so smart, like those strategic micro recoveries for your brain.
Yeah. And the 2-minute rule is another one that I love. If something takes less than 2 minutes, just do it now. It's amazing how much mental clutter you can clear by just tackling those tiny tasks as they come up.
That's a good one. Oh,
Yeah.
and tracking your time, even just for like a week. I know it sounds a little tedious, but it can be so eye-opening to actually see where your hours are going.
Yeah.
You might be surprised.
Yeah, it's like a personal audit of your most valuable resource, right? So time management gives you that structure, that framework. But what about the inner game, that drive to stick to the plan? That's where self-discipline comes in.
Absolutely. Self-discipline is that muscle that allows you to align your actions with your intentions, even when, that motivation dips. And the material emphasized building this through things like establishing consistent routines.
Yeah.
Like putting those behaviors on autopilot so you don't have to constantly rely on willpower.
Right.
Minimizing distractions, obviously, is huge in this day and age.
Right.
Learning to tame those devices and create those boundaries for yourself.
Right.
And also setting clear boundaries with other people, learning to say no to commitments that don't really align with your priorities.
It's so much more sustainable to focus on building one small habit at a time rather than trying to overhaul everything overnight, right? It's like planting a seed and nurturing its growth.
Exactly. And speaking of nurturing, we had to talk about emotional regulation.
Oh, yes.
Because your emotions can either be your biggest ally or your biggest roadblock on this self-management journey.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're easily thrown off by stress or frustration or, those inevitable setbacks, it can completely derail your best laid plans. What were some of the strategies that you saw for managing those emotional responses?
Well, mindfulness and meditation came up a lot. It's all about increasing that self-awareness
Yeah.
and responding intentionally rather than just reacting impulsively. And then simple things like deep breathing exercises, to calm your nervous system in those moments of stress or anxiety.
Yeah.
And journaling, taking the time to actually write down your thoughts and feelings. It can give you so much insight into your patterns and help you process things in a healthier way.
Oh, and one piece of advice that really stuck with me was to pause before reacting to a challenging situation and ask yourself, what's the most effective way to navigate this?
Yeah, create that space, that gap between the trigger and your response so you can choose wisely.
Yeah.
But even with all the best systems in place, things will inevitably go off track. Life happens, and that's where accountability comes in. Right. Accountability is about taking ownership of those successes,
Mm-hmm.
but also those missteps, those stumbles along the way. And the sources suggested things like using habit trackers or keeping a journal to visually see your progress, your consistency, sharing your goals with a trusted friend or a mentor or even an accountability partner. Having that external support can be so helpful. And then regularly doing those self-reviews.
Yeah.
Checking in with yourself, taking stock of what's working, what's not, what needs to be adjusted. It's all about that continuous improvement.
Right. That self-review is it's like a course correction to make sure that you're not just blindly following a plan that maybe isn't serving you anymore. And finally, being able to adapt, to be flexible when things don't go according to plan, that seems so crucial.
Oh, absolutely. And the material really emphasized this idea of viewing setbacks as learning opportunities.
Yeah.
Not as signs of failure. Cultivating that growth mindset, that belief that your abilities can be developed, and being open to new ideas and adjusting your approach when necessary. It's how you navigate this unpredictable world that we live in.
Absolutely. So it really is this interconnected web of skills all working together to help you, to empower you to be the architect of your own success.
Yeah, and it's not about reaching some mythical state of perfect self-management.
Right?
It's a journey, an ongoing process of learning, implementing, adapting.
Right.
And it requires that consistent effort, that commitment to living intentionally.
Absolutely. So just to bring it all together, we've talked about the power of setting those SMART goals, then prioritizing those tasks using frameworks like the Eisenhower Matrix. We've explored a bunch of time management techniques from time blocking to Pomodoro, the 2-minute rule, tracking your time. We talked about building self-discipline, minimizing distractions, strengthening emotional regulation through mindfulness and journaling. And we discussed the importance of accountability and that adaptability, that ability to view those setbacks as learning opportunities. It's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, it is. But it's exciting stuff, because it's all within our control. And like one of the sources so beautifully put it, you are your most important project. So as you reflect on everything we've talked about today, I want you to consider this. What's one area of your self-management that maybe if you dedicated even a little bit of consistent effort to improving could have the biggest positive impact on your life right now?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
That's a great question to leave people with.
Yeah, something to ponder.